Hi, I'm just curious, who are you recording for?
And that's what we're pursuing. All remains to be seen. Fair enough.
I'm not right. Oh, like I said, it's an island task, so it's much of
There's Brian Kotowski. I think we're getting ready to go.
That's all they have. Hey, is there a place online? Yeah.
Set up for 100. I'm like,
Okay, very good.
let's go one. We have enough seats for everybody at the before we start, I am going to introduce
They are gone. I know. Your marker.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, honey.
My name is Brian Gutowski. I'm the Manistee County Emergency Management Coordinator. And I want to start off this meeting and welcome you all to the Manistee County Shoreline Erosion meeting. I think it's a very important conversation. We can get out a lot of really good information and get everybody kind of on the same page with what we've experienced, what we're looking at now, and what we're looking at potentially in the future. I want to start off tonight with a couple of thank yous. First to the Little River Casino Resort and the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians for donating the use of their facility tonight. We have a lot of people. I've said it many times, and I'll continue to say it. Little River Band of Auto Indians, Little River Casino Resort are great community partners and a great organization and a great group to have in our area. So thank you again to them. I'd like to also thank our speakers. We have a pretty diverse panel of subject matter experts up here. Some of them drove a considerable distance to be with us here tonight. It's a lot of scheduling and a lot of people to put together in the same room, so I want to thank my panel of speakers for coming here tonight to be with us and share some information. I'd also like to thank you guys, the community. You know, in my organization, with what we do, I firmly believe in over-communication. The only way to address issues, get things out on the table, and try to find a workable solution is to get everybody in the room and talk about it. So that's the purpose of this meeting tonight, to get subject matter experts, members of the community, all in one place so that we can get good, solid information in the hands of people that this situation is affecting. So thank you all for attending tonight. A couple of things, and I'm going to kind of give a layout. I've got the agenda put up on the board there. We're going to go through some panel introductions so that you know who you're looking at and what organization they're from and what their title is. Then we're going to go into a presentation by the Army Corps of Engineers. Following that presentation, we'll have a presentation by Eagle. And then following that, we're going to go to a sort of a town hall meeting style where folks can ask some of the questions that you have. And we can get those answered by subject matter experts. My hope is that by the end of this meeting, we have maybe not a solution, but at least some good workable information in the hands of all of our community members who are affected by this. So what I'd like to start by doing is having our panel members introduce themselves. So we'll start with our County Board Chair.
Good evening and welcome. And Brian, thank you for putting this on. You've done a yeoman's work in trying to get this accomplished, especially after we had the cancellation on the 12th of November. I am not a subject matter expert on this at all. But as a county commissioner, I think the job that we have is to try to help connect the dots. That's what we're trying to do here this evening. We want to have a warm welcome for the panelists. This is not a subject to grill people on. This is something informational, and we hope to have some information going out to you, as Brian said. So with that, I'm Jeff Dons, County Board, District 5, and current sitting chairman. With that, thank you.
Hi, I'm Dale George. I'm the Public Information Officer for Michigan State Police Emergency Management and Homeland Security Division.
I'm Matt Schnapp. I'm also with the Michigan State Police Emergency Management and Homeland Security Division, and I'm the Recovery Unit Manager.
Good evening, everybody. I am Inspector James Grady. I am the Assistant Division Commander for the Michigan State Police Emergency Management and Homeland Security Division.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I'm Joseph Haas. I'm the District Supervisor out of the Gaylord Field Office. I supervise field staff in Cadillac and the Gaylord Field Office for Water Resources Division.
Hello, my name is Jeff Fritzmo, the Corps of Engineers out of Grand Haven Field Office, and I'm in regulatory.
Good evening, my name is Crystal Walker. I'm with the Army Corps of Engineers Detroit District, and I'm in emergency management.
Hello, I'm Misty Crawfider. I am with the Detroit District Corps of Engineers as well, and I'm a hydraulic engineer, and I will be discussing Great Lakes water levels.
Hello, my name is Patrick Bach. I'm the Warning Coordination Meteorologist for the National Weather Service Office in Gaylord.
My name is Megan Powers. I'm the Disaster Program Manager for the American Red Cross that covers this county and 10 others.
Okay, and real quickly, before we get started, we got a lot of folks in the room today, and we really want to get as many questions as we can answered. The presentations will take about 50 minutes, and we're hoping to wrap this up in about 2 hours. So if you could try to limit yourself to at least one question to start out with, so that we can get everybody an opportunity to ask as many questions as we possibly can. With that, we'll start with the presentation by the Army Corps.
evening. Again, Crystal Walker, Army Corps of Engineers, Detroit District Emergency Management. So I will be co-giving this presentation with Missy Kropfreiter. She will be discussing Great Lakes water levels, and then we'll kind of launch into what we can do within emergency management within the Corps, and also just a brief look into some of our longer-term programs that may be applicable in these types of scenarios. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Missy and get this thing started.
Thank you, Crystal. First, what I always like to do when I'm talking about Great Lakes water levels is to kind of give an overview of the vast size of our system. We are always familiar with, our perspective, what is in our backyard, what we're familiar with. But I like to illustrate that the Great Lakes Basin is huge. It's an international watershed. And by watershed, I mean everything on that map that is in green or blue. Any rainfall, any precipitation that falls in that colored blue or green area makes its way into our Great Lakes. So where we are in part of that system, again, is large and vast. There's something on here that I always like to point out, and I know there's a lot of statistics about how many 100,000 square miles of land, but the Great Lakes itself has more shoreline than the Pacific and the Atlantic coast of the United States. So just to, again, put that kind of in a framework of a bigger perspective of how large our basin is. So that kind of describes, the aerial map there on the right. And then on the left, I like to take the Great Lakes and I flip them on their side. What do they look like in a profile view? Like, okay, so they cover a wide area. How deep do they go? And this just illustrates really how vast and deep Lake Superior is. And then the water travels downstream, so to speak, through the St. Mary's River. And it goes into Lake Michigan Huron. And for the purpose of everything I'll be discussing, we consider Lake Michigan Huron to be one when we do our forecast because they are joined with the Straits of Mackinac. And then it goes down through the St. Clair River and into Lake St. Clair, which is very close to where I grew up, and I always thought Lake St. Clair was so huge and amazing. And then when I see it on this map, I get a little sad because it's just a white spot in the river. And then we move downstream into Lake Erie, and then of course over Niagara Falls, into Lake Ontario, through the St. Lawrence Seaway, finally into the Atlantic Ocean. So this just gives you perspective on how we are in relation to the sea. So when we talk about water levels, it's above sea level. And the scale here shows you, it's like 2,200 miles until we get to the Atlantic Ocean. But we're approximately 580 feet higher than sea level where we are in Lake Michigan here. So some notes about water levels. All of the levels I'm going to be discussing are an elevation above sea level. They're not a depth. If you want a depth, you'd have to look at some sort of navigation chart or have some other information with you. I've already covered the Michigan Huron thing. All levels I will be discussing are lake-wide mean. So what that is we collect data all the time at master gauges across the Great Lakes. They collect data every 6 minutes, average those into an hourly data. The hourlies get averaged into a daily, and those dailies get averaged into a monthly. And those monthly averages are what go into the record books. The 100 years, so our period of record now goes back to 1918. So when I refer to a period of record or a record high, that's from now back to 1918. The Detroit District, we are the official keepers of the water levels, but we coordinate everything with Environment and Climate Change Canada because this is a binational resource. And the primary drivers of water level fluctuations are the changing weather patterns and the fluctuations in water supply. And that leads me to my next slide, which is my favorite. Because really, as a hydraulic engineer with a degree in civil and environmental engineering, my job focuses on third grade earth science. This is what drives water levels, the hydrologic cycle. These lakes have been around for tens of thousands, for 10,000 years. And it is this cycle that has shaped and changed how these levels are moving. So in the wintertime, we get the snow accumulation. It stays on the land. Then in the springtime, we get those rains, things start to warm, the spring melt occurs. In the summer, maybe a few thunderstorms roll through, that lake water is starting to heat up. Finally, we get to fall, and evaporation happens. So the way that impacts water levels on a seasonal variation is you have the lower levels in the wintertime, you get your spring rise, I think in Michigan Huron we peak around July. Of course, it peaks later the further up you go in Lake Superior, but I believe Michigan Huron peaks in July, and then it should, if it were following a normal seasonal decline, begin its decline into the fall as evaporation increases, and then the cycle continues. So those are the seasonal changes that we see in water levels on a bigger scale. Now we take these components that I had on my third grade earth science map, and we break these down into little pieces. In our office, we have PhDs, we have meteorologists, we have some fantastically intelligent people running models, we work with the Weather Service, we pull data, and we calculate what is called net basin supply. And that supply takes into account evaporation, precipitation, and runoff, so everything there in red. Those are the factors that we are estimating, that then we calculate and we put into models to project water levels for the next 6 months. What I also like to point out is everything in red that's circled there is controlled by Mother Nature. Those factors have the biggest influence on water levels. After we calculate our net basin supply, we take our gauged data that we have. So for instance, inflow from the upstream lake, that would be the inflow from Lake Superior. So that would be the St. Mary's River flow. And then we take into account the outflow through St. Clair River. Sorry. And then that's how we get the net total supply. And we do this on a monthly basis. So what we are forecasting again are the supplies to the lakes themselves. And then we translate that into water levels. You don't have to look at any details here. I just like to give, this is the past 100 years of data of those monthly means of levels. We're starting on the top with Lake Superior. We move down to Michigan Huron, St. Clair, Erie, and Ontario. And I just like to show this to kind of give you the feel of what's been going on over the past 100 years. And again, this is only the 100 years that we have coordinated data for. Lakes have been around much longer before that. But for statistical reasons and confidence in the data we have, we use this 100-year period. So what I'd like to focus on now is the right-hand side. That's what's in the most recent memory. This is the biggest reason why we're all here tonight, and that is, well, maybe first I'm going to talk about something we probably forgot about. We had a period of low water that was a little over 10 years, and that was the longest persistence of below average levels that we ever had in the past. At that point, it would have been 90 years. But you know, there were record lows that occurred on the lakes, and we wanted to know where was the water going. Everybody was concerned about low levels because there are concerns on both the high and low ends of water levels. Quickly after that, we had a record rise in levels, and that occurred in a matter of just 2 years. Specifically, you can see on Lake Michigan Huron, we went from a record low all the way up to about average, and then it continued to rise. And to get that to occur, to get those things to occur, it took successive seasons of cold winters. Those cold winters create an ice cover on the lake. And once you put that ice cover on the lake, you have minimized and eliminated evaporation. We had high snow. We had extremely wet springs. So those consecutive seasons of just wet conditions, the ice cover, that's what led to the record rise. And it wasn't just on Michigan Huron. You can see it happen on all 5 of the lakes. And here we are at present. 4 out of the 5 lakes set record highs this past summer, well, spring and summer. Michigan Huron was, I think, a centimeter shy of its record high. So for all intents and purposes, we're near record highs on all of the lakes. So this kind of recaps like the past summer, and we were all, you know, I don't want to say we were caught off guard, but it was quite a change from that decade of low water levels, that record rise we all witnessed. And these were all of the record highs that were recorded. This is that monthly basis I talked about. So May, June, July, August, and September, we set record highs. So in 2019, that was a whopper of a year. We just did our forecast yesterday, and we're starting to get all the documents together to be released. And finally, this past November, there were no record highs set across the lakes. So back to that, the net basin supply, the components I showed about water levels, what impacts them. This is more of an illustration that led to the rapid rise and where we're at today. So the past 5 years, was the wettest 5-year period on record for the entire Great Lakes and Midwest. Everybody in that deep teal color, it was the wettest 5 years in the past. Now when we go to the weather data sets, I'm gonna have to look to some of my weather service people and make sure I'm right. It's about 124 years of data is what they use, but of course, since I'm talking about the past 5 years, this was the wettest 5-year period in the past 120 years of data. And that's, again, not just us. You can also see down, near Texas and in other areas. So it's been wet in more than just our backyards. Looking ahead, these are the outlooks we get from the Climate Prediction Center. These are some of the data points that we use when we do our water level forecasts. And looking out a month, those are the maps that are on the top. The temperature is on the left, and the precipitation outlooks are on the right. So basically, they're saying, as a whole, there's a slightly better chance that we'll see above average temperatures in the next 30 days. Precipitation, they're having a signal for it to be a better chance of being wetter, and that is both in the 1 month and 3 month. So I know that's not probably what everybody wanted to hear. And these are pieces of data that we use in our models when we are doing our water level forecasts. And if you've been to our webpage, which is, I think I'm going to have on my next slide. Oh, it's way down. If not, I can send this out. But we update our water levels. All the data I showed you today is on our website. This is a graph, and I apologize, I'm an engineer. This is how we speak, so I'm going to walk you through it. What we have here, Lake Superior and Lake Michigan Huron, the purple dots, those are those long-term averages of the past 100 years of data. This is about where the average water levels would be. The blue line is the water level that was recorded in 2018. So it gives you just some context. And that red line is this year's water levels. So you can see the significant change that occurred in the spring. April, May, June, we got walloped. I think there were parts of this area that got 15 to 16 inches of rain, or it was a significantly wet spring. And that was what set up those record high levels. And they just kind of stayed there throughout the summer. Now what I want to draw your attention to are these green dots that you see. They're probably hard to see on the left-hand side, but those are our forecast points. And so those go out for 6 months. So you have November, we forecasted just about right. We skirted the record high. We're looking at December of potentially being a little closer. And again, this is for December. These aren't going to be July's levels that we saw. But then you go now into 2020. So January, the green dot, February, March, and April. And it's probable, if conditions remain as we've seen, that we will be tying the record highs for those months. If there is a very dry, next several months, we could potentially have lower levels. And then on the flip side of that coin, if it gets wetter and we get some good ice cover, it's possible we could be above. Our most recent forecast was performed, like I said, yesterday, and we're getting documents together to release that, and it goes out into May, and it shows very similar predictions, potentially just like maybe 1 or 2 inches higher. And again, just to illustrate that these levels are happening across all of the Great Lakes. These are the lower lakes, as we like to refer to them. They also will be higher than they were last year, and that's mostly because we're set now to be higher than we were in 2018. So if you think about the accumulation. And I think with that, I'll turn it to Crystal.
All right, so as you can see, especially within the Army Corps and even within our panel, so water levels are a great tool, and they're used as input data for a lot of other practices. So for us in emergency management, we are deeply partnered with our forecasting office, and we get those forecasts and we really start feeding that into our communications with you guys, with our partners at the state, the counties. What are we in together and what can we do about it? So that kind of leads me into the rest of this is how can the Army Corps of Engineers help me? If water levels are high now, let's see what next year brings. what capabilities can the Army Corps of Engineers bring to bear. So I'm going to briefly touch on two categories, the first being emergency assistance, what we can provide right now for you, and then our longer term solutions that are going to require longer time frames, a little bit more money, and more coordination. So very briefly, for the Army Corps of Engineers, all of our work for emergency management falls under two main authorities. The first is Public Law 8499, so that allows us to assist communities, the states, the counties, local jurisdictions with your emergency management challenges. And then the second is the Stafford Act, which is our ability to help FEMA with really large national level emergencies. So whenever you see a large hurricane hit the southeast and the big red castles on workers in the field, that is all under Stafford Act authority. So that does not apply in this particular case. Everything that we're doing for you guys is subject to Public Law 8499 and the limits of that policy. So just remember that as we discuss this moving forward, you're not going to see the same missions that are televised. We are not formally in a FEMA partnership under Stafford Act for this event. So that's the big takeaway for this slide. So again, for Public Law 8499, this is our ability to go into communities and provide solutions for their challenges. All of our assistance, because we are the federal government, is supplemental to all the levels of government below the federal government. So state, counties, and locals have to put in some sort of effort before we can come into that community and provide supplemental assistance. And because of that, we're really tightly partnered with our constituents at each of these levels, because any request for assistance has to come through the state, and thus we want to make sure that the entire line of communication is engaged. The county is aware of your issue, the state is aware of your issue, and we're aware of your issue. So if the communication jumps in at a certain level in the rung that's maybe out of order, we'll make sure that we get it aligned for everyone. So I want to just right out the gate address the main question that we get. Under Public Law 8499, we have absolutely no authority to address erosion issues. It is a hard limit in our policy. That is our governmental, congressionally written policy. So anything related to erosion for emergency assistance, we cannot provide assistance for. But what we can do, so our assistance falls into two main categories. The first is technical assistance. This is a very vague capability, which is great for you guys. It's essentially our ability to talk with other governmental entities and answer their questions. Hey, I have this really unique challenge in my community, what can I do? We have a massive repository of great thinkers in our agency, and so we're enabled to throw a lot of that knowledge and effort into those, looking for those solutions for our community. So for example, we can do modeling, we can do provide data that we already have on hand, we can send in trainers to teach you how to flood fight in your community. All of that is under technical assistance, and all of that is provided at no cost to the state, the county, or the locals. That is all Army Corps of Engineers money. So as a part of that, we do have a trained flood fight team within our district. Every district does. So on an annual basis, they are trained in flood fight techniques. So how to fill sandbags, how to teach communities how to fill sandbags, where sandbags should go for maximal protection. So this is an asset that we definitely like you guys to know about, so that if we do send people into your community, you can feel really confident that they're tried and true, and especially this year, really trained in the types of issues that you guys are experiencing. So just to give some perspective, our Emergency Operations Center in Detroit District, we activated on May 2nd of this year, and have been providing support for the past, 7 months now. And so at this time, there are 8 Michigan counties that are receiving technical assistance from us. That is in addition to 5 counties in Wisconsin. all of those taking advantage of that capability, just bringing questions to us so that we can see what we can do for them. Typical assistance requests are mainly for sandbagging technique. How do I properly fill a sandbag? There is a right answer. And what do I do with limited resources? If I have 10,000 sandbags and 2,000 properties, what do I need to do? And, for example, when it comes to filling sandbags, were you aware that the optimal amount to fill a sandbag is 1/2 to 2/3 full? If you do under, you're wasting effort. If you do too much, it may be too heavy. It's not going to be as effective. Or you don't have to tie them. You can actually place them without tying, as long as you follow proper technique in regards to the flow of the water. And then finally, a pyramid shape is actually best. Single width walls don't have the strength of a pyramid type structure. So a lot of these we can bring into communities and show you on the ground what you need to do. So here's some pictures from our response this year. You can see in the top left, that was actually in Detroit. We've seen communities that are now under feet of water that they've never seen before. How do you sandbag against that? That's something that we can help with. Top right, we did a sandbagging effort, helping the local jurisdiction figure out what they needed to do. How many staff do you need? What does your staging area need to look like? Bottom left, what if my fire hydrants are under 2 feet of water? And that was before ice season. These kind of issues that we can address under technical assistance. So the second category that we can provide for communities under emergency assistance is direct. So that's our ability to provide assistance in the form of flood fight supply. So we can actually give you materials to be used in the community. This one has a lot more very specific guidance. So anything that's taken from us has to be reimbursed, either in kind or at a reduced rate. And it can only be used for public infrastructure. So really within the core, you're going to see us talk a lot about community solutions. We cannot provide support to individual homeowners, individual businesses. Really, it's critical public facilities and community solutions. Okay. So coming back to this point, so we've talked about emergency assistance. Unfortunately, erosion is not something that we can address, but the Corps has a big part to play in erosion conversations. That's why we're here. So I just want to kind of highlight a couple of the ways that we can address some of your issues. So the first is, if you're putting erosion protection in place, the Army Corps of Engineers is part of that permitting process. So not only do you need to be aware of your city, county, state permits, but we also have a part to play in that as well. So we do have regulatory contacts with us here that can answer a lot of these questions. The point here is just whenever you're putting something in place, just be very aware of the permits that you need to have in hand to do so. So in addition to emergency assistance authorities, we also have longer term programs in a variety of different directions. We do a lot of work as an agency, and a lot of that work is applicable to these types of issues. So for example, here is a summary of our continuing authorities programs. So section 205 and 14, both of those can directly relate to erosion control in your community. So these are, as I mentioned, longer term programs. They are subject to cost shares, and they are also a proposal type system. So just because a community puts in a proposal does not mean it will be selected and or funded the particular year they put it in. And I'm going to highlight a couple of programs. So my point here is not all of the fine print of what this program does. What I really want to point out is we can do studies about what's going on in your community, what would be the best solution, but this program does not result in construction, and at the bottom you can see the timeline is 1 to 2 years if approved and funded. So we do have programs, they take a little bit longer. Another example for that section 205 that I mentioned, so there is a cost share, and then your timeline is 2 to 10 years if approved and funded. So we definitely want you guys as a community to think about these solutions, but these are not something that can be put into place by next summer. So these are the conversations we want you guys to be having. All right, so kind of the key takeaways from our presentation, as Missy mentioned, in 2020, we may see a continued pattern of record or near record lake levels. So we are starting 2020 higher than we started in 2019. From there, we're gonna see what Mother Nature deals us. Manistee County right now is not currently approved to receive emergency technical assistance from USACE, but we are here, we are partnered with your county and with state emergency management. That's why we're here talking with you guys today. So we just wanna make sure that that communication is still happening. 3, as I mentioned, just be sure that if you are putting in place some kind of erosion protection or erosion control, that you're pursuing the proper permits. And then finally, we do have a lot of other programs beyond emergency assistance that can help you, that can help provide relief in your communities. But they do have some significant lead times, they have costs for your community. So just something that needs to be considered holistically. So we did want to mention there's a great publication that was put together actually in the 90s, some years ago by the Corps, talking about all these issues in one set document. What we can do for erosion, what we can do for ice, what to do if you live on a bluff. Great materials, it's still really relevant today, just like it was when it was written. Just make sure you're using updated contact information, which we will provide at the end of the presentation. But highly, highly recommend this. And it can easily be found on our High Lake Level website. So we have put together a dedicated website. It is public for you guys to act as a one-stop shop for all of this information. How do I find water levels? How do I find my regulatory contact if I have a question about a permit? How do I get in touch with emergency management? All of this in one set location. So if you, for some reason, forget that website up there, if you Google Detroit District High Water, it'll come right up. If you have questions about lake levels, the contact there, Keith Kompaltowitz, he is an absolute expert and can answer questions really, really well, so highly recommend him. And then if you have any questions about emergency management or technical assistance, our first recommendation, because we like that chain of communication, is to make sure that your local emergency management is aware of your issues. So getting that whole conversation up the chain is really important. But we're also willing to take your concerns and talk through things with you as well. So our email is listed down below. So with that, I think we're going to turn it over to the next presenter.
So hi, I am Joseph Haas again. You can call me Joe. I am with Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. Formerly, for those of you who remember us as DEQ, we are now in Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. Pardon me for a minute. I'm going to call this presentation. So this is a relatively high-level presentation of what we do. So that's me, District Supervisor, the Gaylord and Cadillac District offices. So again, this is going to be somewhat duplicative of the Corps' presentation. A lot of similar information. Great Lakes are cyclical. We know that. It's expected to last for several years. Nobody's got a crystal ball. We don't know what to expect for the immediate future. We're using our resources to do our best to determine what to expect. Pay attention if you're interested. Obviously you are, you're here. Pay attention to the Corps' publications, NOAA's publications that are coming out, National Weather Service as well. All of these groups are studying this issue, and certainly we're trying to provide as updated information as we possibly can. The bottom bullet there, I think, has not really been mentioned, and some of you may have been interested in that. Great Lakes aren't strictly the issue here. We also have high water inland. If you have inland property, you're probably also experiencing high water. We're seeing a lot of sandbags, a lot of pumping going on inland lakes as well. It's a problem of high groundwater everywhere. And it probably should say streams as well. We were expecting streams to be representing extremely high water. So this is a slide we've already seen tonight with the Corps of Engineers. I'm not going to necessarily go over this again, but just to sort of stress the fact, and this is a core product here, the fact that we are in a high water cycle. So the shorelines that Eagle and Water Resources specifically is going to be involved in relate to Part 325, the Great Lakes Protection Act, and Part 353 specifically, 323 as well. These are our regulatory obligations. Eagle is a regulatory agency, so we're here to oversee these natural resources, to offer some assistance in getting through our permit process. We do not want to be the bottleneck. We often hear that we are the problem of a holdup when a project is not being implemented because a property owner doesn't have permits yet. Honestly, when we dig deeper into that, typically we find there's another problem. It's not us. It's a consultant that isn't responding to information, or an information request that's gone out from our office that's not been responded to. So, as has been said already, communication is the key. If you've got an issue that you need to get addressed, and you are applying for permits or think you may need to apply for permits, talk to us. We're here to help you get through this process and quickly. If we have a situation on one of these types of environments, and you've got what could be considered urgent or an emergency, we can turn over a permit in 24 hours as long as we have the correct information to review. If it's a public notice project, we could issue a public notice and a permit the same day. So as long as we have the proper information, the proper application fees, we are willing and able to process these things. So again, communication is the key. And just some slides from the area. Obviously, we're seeing substantial damage with this high water. Specifically, the catastrophic storms we've seen, and these storms, titling them catastrophic is maybe a little over the mark. These are normal storms to occur in the region. There's been really nothing that's been extreme, but we have had impacts. October 16th to 22nd were two big storms, where if you had Shoreline, you probably saw it eroding tens of feet even. The Thanksgiving evening storm was probably greater than those other previous two. But design, build, permitting capacities are really at the max. If you need to have work done, you need to find a contractor that will do that work, and those guys are I believe, largely maximized. You need to find somebody and get on their schedule. That'd be our recommendation. So our role, again, is specific to permitting the mitigation structures, mitigation being erosion mitigation here. We do have a section in our group that is dedicated to assisting coastal communities, but that isn't largely going to affect or largely help the individual property owners. We don't have money to give to individual property owners to do shoreline protection, unfortunately. Again, just some extreme extreme images from drones and erosion. We all know keeping vegetation on the shoreline is a good idea. Some of these areas it's not possible with steep banks and already eroding toes, but the cedars that we see out there, cedars can grow to be 1,000 years old. Please don't cut your cedars. Some of these areas are dune grass and it's already too late, but so the structure you see in the background here is likely a structure that was built probably 85, 86 in the last high water period. This shoreline is already eroded from this point, very near the house. So our permitting for Part 325, our Great Lakes Protection Act, has steadily increased over the same period that high water has occurred. So you can see we're at record levels of permitting. So we are issuing permits. We've instigated an internal response team. We are not in, we haven't instigated anything where we're calling emergency, but I would say there's plenty of times where we are issuing what I would say is the emergency permits. So not to put too fine a point on it, but we are expediting permits again. We're here to help, and it really takes communication. If you've got a structure that's about to fail, talk to us. We can get you what our end of the bargain is, right? We can get you a permit application, work you through the permit process, get you a permit. We don't want to be the holdup. The key is communication. So again, just repeating the message. We're here to work with you. We have prioritized response activities. We've offered unlimited overtime for field staff that are working on shoreline properties. You can only go 100% so long, but we are in that mode right now. And there's a priority, right? If you've got a risk to critical infrastructure, human safety, habitable homes, infrastructure, these are things that we are going to prioritize. We are exercising emergency permitting authority again. We can turn over stuff fast if we have the right information. We've instigated, now we have a minor project for sandbags. Although I would caution you that that's not going to be your end solution. Sandbags are a temporary solution. And we want to be careful and not be installing a lot of plastic geotech sandbags that are going to degrade. I think most of the sandbags that I'm aware of are expected lifetimes are maybe 5 years, and that's well exposed to the elements. So they won't last forever. They might last longer than that. They might last less than that, depending on their exposure to sunlight and weathering. But then you'll end up with the little strips of plastic all over your frontage, and nobody wants that. We're all conscious of plastics in our environment, and if you have shoreline, you see plenty of that already. So we do have a web page. If you have an interest, please write that down or contact one of your local DEQ, I say DEQ, one of your local EAGLE staff. Even I'm still learning the acronym. We have general water level information. We do have a contractors list. This is self-published by contractors, right? They offer their name to us and we put it on the website. These aren't vetted by any way or means. They are contractors that we know to be in that business because they've told us so. You're advised, if you're hiring a contractor, to do that like you would any contracting service, right? Investigate, maybe get as many bids as possible. I suspect this is a very difficult time to do that, but you want to investigate your contractors. If you suspect you have a contractor that may not be the top contractor, you can search our database, call our staff. We're generally going to be very hesitant to talk candidly about contractors because we don't want to get in trouble, right? Contractors are in that business for a reason, and we're not in the business to talk bad about contractors. But you could investigate how many compliance situations they're in. If they have ongoing compliance, is a good question for a contractor. That would tell you at least if they've applied for proper permitting. The frequently asked questions document was available. I apologize. We printed 100 of those out. I didn't expect they would last, but that is available on the website as well. If you got a copy of that, you're probably lucky tonight, but you can get that online easily if you have an internet connection. We do have our Environmental Assistance Center has been versed in these issues. At least they know of it. If you call them, tell them what your issue is. You are calling because of shoreline, high water, erosion issues, and they will steer you to somebody who is more knowledgeable than the typical environmental assistance operator and can help you. So just some communications that we've done. We've had some press releases, articles. We're doing webinars. We're doing these type of outreach. If you've got local associations and you can get together and agree on a date, we could potentially send field staff. I'd be willing to attend such meetings to discuss creative solutions or discuss our process and how to work through it. So some of the common questions, this was a photo that was taken last week, Manistee County. Are we requiring permits for work on the Great Lakes? So if it's wet, you probably need a permit. If it's in the lake, even though the lake is high, you should be applying for permits. If your work is in the water. And that holds true for us and the Corps of Engineers. If you submit an application through our My Water system, we share it with the Corps of Engineers. So there's not a need to fill out 2 applications. Admittedly, it can be a difficult application to work through, which is why a good contractor or a good consultant is worth what you might pay them, depending on your interests. If you have the capability and are computer savvy, you can fill out a My Waters application yourself. Oftentimes in the shoreline around here, there's critical dune areas, high-risk erosion areas. Permits are required for work in those areas, whether it's in the water or not. But again, one application covers both. We call it the joint permit application. It covers both the Army Corps of Engineers and the Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy permitting. We share information between each other to try and streamline that process and help not have efforts be duplicative. There's also other local regulations that may apply. A good contractor, a good consultant can help you work through that. We can advise on those when we're aware of them. But certainly you want to hire the best people you can. So somebody with experience. Those guys are busy right now, I can tell you that. There's not enough of them out there right now. There's a lot of information. The Corps of Engineers showed some information. They've got a lot of research that's been done on Shoreline. There's some good publications out there. We have information on our website, as I've said. Wisconsin has some good information on their website as well, Wisconsin DNR. Some of that they've taken from Michigan. There's watershed groups around that have done a lot of research and have information on their websites. I recommend you do as much research as possible if you think you've got a problem. One of the key, and again, I think I said this already, maybe in a different way, but be prepared if you're submitting an application to turn any questions that you get from us, from the agencies, turn them around quickly. That will help us expedite your application. If we send you an email asking questions, please respond to that email. Turn information around quickly. It helps us turn the application into a permit faster. So yeah, this is the $1 million question. What's the best solution? Well, it really depends on the frontage. It's an individual and a site-specific solution. We're trying to minimize natural resource impacts while affording as much protection as possible. This was a publication that the Corps just talked about. So alternatives to shore protection. The easiest, well, nothing's easy in this situation if you've got Great Lakes shoreline, but moving the house is an option that I've learned in many of these situations is less expensive than shoreline protection. And it's more consistently a solution in the long term. We do have professional house movers. We have had maybe more than a handful in our district, homes that have been moved. But there's problems with that as well, right? You have to have property to move it to. But certainly something to consider. If you have property that you can move a house away from the water, then maybe you don't need as robust a shoreline protection, armoring or something of that nature. I think we've started collecting shoreline or home movers on the website as well. There's not that many of them out there. So if you're in high risk or critical dune, you need a permit to move the house as well. And we would work with you to expedite that permit. So we do not want to be the bottleneck. So sandbags are an option. We have a minor project category that's published for that. So that means it's a $100 application fee. And it can be an expedited permit without a site inspection necessarily. So that means it can be done really quickly. But again, we're going to be monitoring these, and we may come back in years in the future if the water goes down and request that they be removed. Some examples. So yeah, here's some of the tough questions, right, that we're all wrestling with. Who's responsible if my home falls in the lake? There was an occasion recently in Grand Rapids District where there was a house that was about to fall in. We luckily got action at the last minute, and it was able to be demolished before it fell in the lake. But marine debris is an issue, right? If you leave your boat on Lake Michigan shoreline and it gets shoaled in and demolished with, you know, ice push or wave action, you will be required in general to remove that. This is very similar. If you are aware that the house is about to fall in or a structure is about to fall in and you don't do anything about it, that it could potentially be a problem. We aren't taking a very aggressive approach at seeking enforcement. As far as fines go, will I be fined if that's not what we're in the business of. We're not in the business of issuing fines. We want to protect the resource. So if you have a septic tank and a structure that falls in the lake, you will likely be asked to remove that. And that could be very costly. So suspending the laws, that's not an option as a field supervisor. I don't have that option. We have the sideboards of the law and the regulations, and we have to operate within them. I can't advise you to do things outside of the law, and I would not do that. Is there any funding help available? There's funding for municipalities and for the larger community groups. I don't believe there's funding, not from the Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, for any single-family residential properties. We simply don't have a pot of money. We do have the coastal management program, so this is the municipalities that can work on planning and designing for prevention of issues. And so that's where this comes in. Contact information for Rhonda at the bottom, but that's going to be not going to be much help to an individual family owner. So again, our Environmental Assistance Center can help you navigate the application process and help get you started towards a permit. And any field staff, anybody in our field offices with Water Resource Division should be able to help you. You have a page dedicated to this, very similar to the Army Corps of Engineers. If you Google State of Michigan, Eagle High Water, you should get a link to this page. And I think that's it. I don't know, is there another presentation, Brian? No.
So thank you very much to our presenters. We are going to take just a few minutes. Wall so that we can create a little more space so that the folks who are stuck in the hallway can get in here. So it's going to be just a short disruption in the back until we can get that wall open. Before we go there, I wanted to just mention one more thing, especially for Manistee County residents. The Conservation District is a great community partner in this. And if you check out their website, if you Google Manistee Conservation District, they have an entire section of their website dedicated to this issue as well. Just trying to get out as many resources and as much information as possible. So please don't forget about the Conservation District. They're all over this too. So check them out. For just a few minutes here, and then we'll reconvene after we get the wall opened up and get people accommodated. And then we'll go to our questions. Thank you.
We can hear you.
It's coming.
right, we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, so again, we had the presentations, and I appreciate Eagle and the Army Corps making time in their schedules to come up and present that information for us. And now I wanted to take around an hour to allow for kind of a town hall style meeting where folks can ask questions and we can direct those to the subject matter experts here in front of us to try to get some of the answers for the questions that you have. So we do have a podium up here that has a microphone, and then Lieutenant DeCastro also has a microphone that he can travel with if folks aren't able to get out of their seats and make it to the microphone. So the floor is yours to ask some questions.
Hi, I'm Ron Wilson. I'm the president of the Great Lakes Coalition, and I'm asking a simple question right now. Critical dune areas are now being expanded by the DEQ or DEGL. Can you explain why they're doing it now, and at the same time we are now facing high water marks and high water issues, and this will preclude many of us from doing any work without a permit, even if it's dry land? Correct?
You do need a permit to work in a critical dune area, that's correct.
So why are you expanding the definition of critical dune areas at this time?
I can't directly answer that question. I don't know. Sue or Robin, do you guys have an idea? I don't know if Sue's in the room. Sue's in the... Robin, can you take that?
Everybody hear that?
No.
Anybody hear that?
Sorry.
But that time frame in '89 was legislatively approved at that point in time in that legislation. So are you going back and getting legislation approving your Atlas change?
We haven't made any changes to the Atlas. We can't. We would have to go to the legislature to make the changes. So they're in an Atlas, they're online, you can look them up, and they do extend to the water's edge.
So we're not expanding our critical dune areas. They exist as they are.
They're having public hearings as we speak on expanding the critical dune areas.
I'm not aware of any of those.
DEGL. Look on your website, again, DEGL, critical dune areas, and you'll see that they're having public hearings on it. Also, DNR, you didn't say that if you get a permit, the permit is good for 5 years.
This is true.
So one of the things that I would encourage DEGL to do is publicize that data and that statement, because my family's cottage is now endangered because our contractor, nor I, knew that a permit was expanded, or allowed to be expanded for 5 years.
Right, every permit we issue is good for 5 years. It's not been expanded, but yes, that's how it's done. We issue permits for the maximum allowable time.
As I said, I would emphasize that in any correspondence and any documents that you have dealing with permits.
I think that's good advice. I think that was an oversight on my part by not saying that. If you think you're going to need to work in the next 5 years, get an application in. The problem is often with paying for the permit. But yeah, 5 years.
In November, there was an editorial article in the local paper about who controls the lake levels, and it mentioned the Internal Joint Commission. And there were possibly 5 things that commission could do. The commission set up with from 3 people from the U.S. and 3 individuals from the Canadian side. And it talked about 5 things they could possibly do to help lower the Great Lakes. And it was basically the way rivers that once flowed out of Lake Superior in different areas those rivers have been reversed and they flow into Lake Michigan, or Lake Superior. And there's a few other things about Niagara Falls and basically sending some additional water out of Lake Michigan into the Chicago River and a few other things. Basically, has anybody contacted, well, first of all, is this a true statement in this editorial? And number two, if it is true, has anybody contacted this commission to help us relieve our problem?
I can take that one. So the International Joint Commission is an international entity, and they do not control lake levels. They regulate outflows at 2 points. And in early 90s, I think it was the level reference study is what that editorial is referring to. They outlined several options to potentially mitigate the high levels that were occurring at that time, but there is no man-made way to permanently control levels at this time. It is primarily driven by Mother Nature. And if there are claims and desires to have changes to the regulation points, that does have to be taken up through the International Joint Commission.
But back in 3 times, in the 52, 74, and 87, they did reverse some of the flow. Couldn't they do that again?
That is something that I believe is being asked of the International Joint Commission, but back in those 3 occurrences when it did happen, I believe it was to the tune of maybe an inch or 2, and that was immediately relieved or overdrawn by Mother Nature's, one event, or you could lose evaporation overnight, or vice versa.
And I did reach out to the IJC. They were unable to attend this meeting. They had a binational meeting to attend. So I have reached out to them and have some information from them.
Good evening. It's my understanding that currently the federal regulations related to floodplains and flood zones are being redrawn or being rewritten and expanded, and that there will be a significant impact along the shoreline with respect to changes to the floodplains and flood zones, which would require homeowners to purchase flood insurance. I was wondering if anyone could speak to that, what the changes might be and the impact on existing zones or floodplains, what changes we're anticipating, and the impacts that it will create as a result.
Thank you for your question. Sue Conradson, Eagle. I'm the District Floodplain Engineer out of the Cadillac District. FEMA is currently in the process of remapping or making new coastal maps for all the Great Lakes. They've been in this process for, Brian can probably quote me how many meetings we've gone to, about 5-6 years. They now have preliminary maps. You can view them online. Some areas are getting new flood zones. Some areas are the flood elevations are going down where they currently have flood zones, and some areas are going up. So there's no one-size-fits-all answer to your question. If you're in a property that's mapped in a flood zone, you carry a mortgage, your lender will require you to buy flood insurance. That is correct. Did I answer all the points you had?
When are these changes going to take effect?
Oh, the maps, FEMA's hoping they will be finalized in 2020 for Lake Michigan. But it is a federal government and those dates do change, but anticipated sometime in 2020 by late summer, fall, was the date they gave us. I have lots of counties that all the dates blur together. So.
Do you have a website? Those maps, those proposed maps are available?
Yes, you can see the preliminary maps online, the government web address, so it's not an easy one to give to you. But my name is Sue Conradson. I'm on the Cadillac office. If you Google my name, you can get my email, drop me a note, and I can send you the link.
Is that C-O-N-R-A-D?
S-O-N, yeah.
At the Cadillac office?
Yep, well, if you just do Eagle, Sue, Conrad, Susan, there's only one of me, so.
Thank you.
Am I going to be getting 500 emails tonight?
And the one thing I will mention about that is, especially if you're moving into a floodplain, it's really important that you take a look at your property, because the purchase of flood insurance prior to those maps taking effect is going to be far more reasonable. So it's really important that property owners take a look at their property on those floodplain maps and know exactly where you fall. Because if you are going to be required to buy flood insurance, it's going to be a lot cheaper for you if you do it before those floodplain maps take effect.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for taking the time out of your schedules for all of you to be here and answer these questions. As you mentioned, or in multiple presentations, there was conversation around there's no perfect plan to hold back further erosion. But let's just play it out a little bit, and I'm going to ask that you possibly give us some categories. So we're going to go through, all of us in this room are probably in the permit process or have been permitted. We're going to get some sort of erosion control put in. But because these lake levels are now near record high, and we had this huge erosion setback from those 3 good-sized storms, many of us in this room went from having a sloping dune down to the water's edge to a cliff. So what our job now is to put the proper erosion control in place, but now we got to stabilize that dune so that we don't, through sloughing, lose more ground. Does that make sense? So during the conversation you mentioned there's no one-size-fits-all plan. Is it possible for one of you who might be an expert in this area to give us some categories? Maybe you got 10 feet of dune, maybe you got 30 feet of dune, maybe you got 150 feet of dune. What are the best ways to stabilize these vertical cliff dunes that we now have so that we don't lose more through sloughing? Was that a clear question? Can anybody address it?
So I'll give it a really quick shot. So that Living on the Coast guide that both us and Eagle mentioned has a lot of articles addressing exactly that issue. So if I have a bluff, what are my options? And it talks about erosion protection, it talks about moving your home, it talks about literally every category of option that you have based upon your situation. So it's general information, but it's a lot of good resources in that direction.
Anybody else in this room?
I'm not a geologist, but I know enough to be dangerous. I remember my Geology 101 from college. And the term that stands out here is the angle of repose. Right, so if you're familiar with that at all, you could take sand, and if you drop it, dry sand, depending on the grain size and shape, it will maintain an angle depending on the different factors of that material. And that's what you're dealing with along the shoreline. A vertical shoreline, you know as well as I, is not sustainable. It will not stay that way. So you either need to shore in front of it or cut the shoulder off back. And if you're too close to that edge, cutting it off back to knock the shoulder of it off isn't a very viable option. So we're going to be considered with that natural angle that material is comfortable in itself existing at, and then vegetating it or armoring it. We do, as an agency, prefer some type of riprap over like a concrete wall or pouring concrete. We're not going to be favorable to that. It's not going to last. It reflects energy. It doesn't dissipate energy. The many facets of natural fieldstone are going to be much more amenable to our environment here and work better, especially if they're placed at the right angle and done correctly. What's correctly, I can't say that right off the cuff. It depends again on the situation, but it's a combination of a lot of different things. And that's where, if you can find somebody with some experience working on the shoreline, they're going to be able to help you do that much better than I. Somebody who's running yellow iron on the shoreline, some of these equipment operators are probably some of the best field engineers we have, the guys that are good. So I don't have a good answer for you, but that's some of the concerns.
That's good. And to the publication that you mentioned, just to remind me what that is and how to find it, please.
The Army Corps publication?
The Coastal Living. Living on the Coast.
That's the Living on the Coast. I think was that a Corps of Engineers or an NRCS publication?
Thank you.
Yep.
Good evening, and I want to thank you for coming to talk to us.
Over history.
What?
Is there anyone that came tonight to address the question of insurance, whether it's flood insurance or homeowners insurance or anything? No. I'm very disappointed that FEMA didn't send someone, because even though they don't take care of...
Ma'am, I'm not an insurance expert, but I have explored the question that you're asking. I've talked to the Michigan Department of Insurance and Finance, DIFS, and as far as erosion insurance coverage, they're not able to find that any companies are offering that. It's possible that they do. There's a coverage called difference in conditions, which is basically you have your house insured for fire and all these other perils, and if something else happens not covered by your regular policy, this difference in conditions could potentially cover it. So that's what I found on that front. With regard to flood insurance, if you have a specific question about that between Sue and myself, we may be able to address that.
Well, what I'm wondering is, I have had to pay flood insurance with my mortgage for over 30 years. Now that my house is in trouble, I am told floods don't happen on Lake Michigan. That is erosion. Yet I have had to pay. My money has just gone. And I bet you there's a lot of other people that have been paying flood insurance to get their mortgage, and they can't collect either, because I am told the definition of a flood doesn't apply to the Great Lakes. They don't flood. Their levels rise and go down. And if you happen to get washed away in the rising, that's not a flood because it's Lake Michigan. I want my money back.
So,
I want my money back, 30 years worth.
I don't work for FEMA.
Well, that's why I'm sorry.
I'm not an insurance expert, but based on conversations that I've had with FEMA, I don't know who has told you this, but that
My flood insurance people.
Okay, so you're private insurance?
Mm-hmm. It was FEMA.
Okay. So I have, well, FEMA backs the flood insurance, and Sue, jump in if I go awry here, but it's funded by the federal government, but it's sold by private insurance. So if that's who you're hearing that from, that may not be accurate information. It's not always the case where insurance agents know everything about the flood insurance program. It's a very complicated program.
But FEMA also refused to help us on Lake Michigan.
Okay, so what I'm told by the insurance expert at FEMA Region 5, that every situation is a specific individual situation, and if you've had a loss, then you need to file a claim, and then it will be reviewed by an adjuster and determined whether it's an eligible claim or not. So have you filed a claim?
I have talked to my flood insurance people about what's happened to my frontage, and that my house was like this close to falling in. And they said that they don't insure damage to seawalls or other protective devices. And if the house were to fall in, that's not a flood, that's erosion. If the lake were to come up and overrun my house, then I would have a flood. So I want to know, how can they charge us when they're not going to cover us?
So flood insurance primarily covers floods. So I think that that's accurate. It does not generally cover erosion. I'm told that sudden erosion that results from a flood can, in some circumstances, be covered. And there again, every case would be treated individually. You would file a claim, and then it would be reviewed by the experts in that field.
But I don't want to prolong this, but why am I told lakes don't flood by the flood insurance? And
Sue can probably address that, but that's not accurate. There are flood plains on the lakes, and there is a definition.
Who can I contact to get that definition?
Sue may be able to.
The FEMA definition of flood is it has to affect one or more properties or 5 or more acres, and it has to be from a surface water source. That's FEMA's definition of a flood. Like you said, if the waters come up and go over your structure, that would be a flood. Occasionally, they will interpret if waters come up and cause erosion. They're case-by-case basis, and you have to file a claim, and they will review that. A seawall is not a insurable structure in FEMA's eyes. That would be your home, your habitable structure. That's what they're insuring, not the seawall. So they're not going to take any flood claims on a damaged seawall. I would suggest that you file a claim and run it up FEMA's flagpole and see how they interpret it, because ultimately it's their decision. Insurance is a whole nother language, and it really needs to
Well,
be
that's
their
why I
experts.
kind of wish you had, especially someone from FEMA here, and, oh, I forgot what else I was gonna say, I guess I talked enough, but,
To answer your question, you can call 1-800-FEMA-MAP, and they also have asked to speak to an insurance specialist and try to see if you can get some help directly from FEMA that way. 1-800-FEMA-MAP.
I also want to know why, and you can't, once you're hooked paying FEMA insurance, flood insurance, you can't quit. As long as you've got a house and a mortgage, they will continue to take it out of you. And I want to know why, if the body of water that's threatening me is Lake Michigan, and they won't cover it, why they've been taking my money for 30 years.
Yeah, that would be also be a question as FEMA, unfortunately, they didn't show up here. If your home is elevated, your grade next to your home is above their estimated flood elevation, there is what's called a letter of map amendment, or a MOMA, so you can petition or ask FEMA, if you show them elevation data from a surveyor, to take your home out the flood zone and remove the flood insurance requirement.
Oh, I went through that years ago.
Okay, so you know what I'm talking
Doesn't
about.
work.
Okay, so that is a tool that's in the toolbox, is not a tool for everyone. And every water body can and will flood, so I always suggest to people, if you're on a water body, even if you get the mandatory insurance taken away, you should always consider buying flood insurance and never tell anybody that you're not gonna flood. So, just always consider.
Oh, I'm flooding, but I'm not going to cover me.
And I said, I empathize with you, I empathize with everybody in this room who's suffering this right now.
I know.
If you can help, the panel does.
Thank you for saving me.
Historically speaking, if you look back over the 60, 70, 80 years, the shoreline has been increasingly creeping in from where it was, let's say, 50, 60 years ago. Is that due to the continuous increase in water level? And I know we've gone through cycles where it's been up and down, therefore it's been receding back and forth, but it has been coming in. The shoreline itself has crept in many, probably 100, where I live, maybe 100 feet or more. And so we're now at a high water level, but I think if you go back 60, 70 years, there was probably a pretty high water level. So I guess the question is it because the lake has continuously, over a period of time, increased its depth, it's been crawling in, and if so, is that predicted to continue?
I'm not sure we have an answer to that other than it's just a natural erosion process along shoreline.
So, specifically what I'm saying is that the shoreline itself has crept in probably more than 50, 60, 70 feet over the last 50, 60 years. And so, if you had built a home 60 years ago, you might have 150 feet to the shoreline. Now you're looking at the house having to be moved. So the question being is, why has that happened? Is it because the lake has continuously, over a period of time, increased its shoreline from increasing depth? And if that's the case, if that's going to continue, let's say over the next 40 years, then there may be another 40 or 50 feet that's going to be eroded. So even though you're putting something in now, 20 years from now, your house might still be in jeopardy if the lake keeps going the same way that it has been. I guess the question is, why is it been doing it?
Well, I think if you had talked to us 10 years ago, we'd have been having the exact opposite discussion. People were saying that the lake is receding. So I know that we have these high-risk erosion areas, and we have done recession studies on those. the numbers are on the website that are the result of those studies that show the annual recession rate of that shoreline. That's one of the numbers that's available. I don't think we have an answer for you, sir.
I want to address the flood insurance aspect and the importance of what's going on currently that's getting pushed down from FEMA as they are redoing the flood maps, and that becomes an issue for the townships. We have the county and the county planning department have been talking with the townships. We are, at the moment, we do not have any agreements with the townships to help assist them administer that floodplain mapping and having a floodplain technician, if you will. But it is something that I can assure you, everybody up and down the coast of Manistee County is aware of in township government. I personally contacted all of the supervisors on the lake shore. So it is ongoing, and think of it, probably the best scenario for everybody in the room is Portage Lake. And if we have another 6 inches to 9 inch rise in Portage Lake and the impact that's going to have on those residents in there, and for those that hold the mortgages and what that's going to do, and that's just one example. There's others obviously, but it's something that everyone that is here needs to be paying attention to, is the new floodplain mapping.
Good evening. It's apparent that a lot of folks here are looking for solutions, as well as becoming educated on high water issues. As a contractor who used to work for the Corps of Engineers and DEQ, basically out of Detroit District and Cleveland, I'd like to at least throw out a couple of things to say. A lot has been said about sandbags as a temporary solution. Well, we used to install fabric formed concrete bank protection. We also used to install gabion baskets. Now, some of these might be a bit light duty in your mind, but they do and may have a purpose for a number of people here. I'd like to get your input on that. Thank you.
We don't like them. They don't function like you intend. They create a hard surface and reflect energy. They tend to dig the shore out in the immediate waterward area. As a general rule, we're going to have a very difficult time permitting them. We don't like the fact that there's not as much interstitial spaces for natural resource. They don't distribute the energy like we want to do along the shoreline. You're building a wall with those structures.
Yeah.
And that's a very unnatural shoreline. I don't know that anybody likes the aesthetic of them either, but that's a lesser concern.
It's interesting that we would perform this work for the Corps of Engineers.
The Corps has a history of doing heavy-handed projects in a lot of different areas, not typically along most of the residential Michigan shoreline.
So you would flat out disapprove of either one of these methods?
We would entertain all. I tell people you can apply for the moon. I'm not going to restrict what you can apply for, but it's a difficult permit to issue. I don't know if the Corps has thoughts on those.
Hi, I'm Rita Alden, and of course, I think a lot of you know that my home is in trouble, but I'm more concerned about the whole shoreline. And what is not mentioned tonight, and by the Corps of Engineers when they're doing all their studies, why aren't they taking into account of any of the man-made things that are out there in the lake, like piers and etc., marinas, or all the hydro dams that are not they're putting more water into Lake Superior than taking out or reversing the way the river is flowing. There are 4 different places that can help
level some of the water out of Lake Michigan to Lake Huron and Superior. But there seems to be no mention of this by the Corps of Engineers. And also, there's no mention of section 111, where the Corps has admitted that they are responsible for the littoral drift, which means that the toe of our banks and the toe of our beautiful shoreline, wherever they're south of these piers, are not being replenished with the sand because they're kept by the piers and pushed out into deeper water. And of course, with the deeper water we have a current that's underneath there. And with the deeper current, with the deeper water, that current gets faster and faster. We don't see that current, but it's like a little buzzsaw. And the longer the pier is in place, that is the way it's solid structure, that little buzzsaw goes faster and faster, but it can't bring anything with it. So what does it do? It takes your complete toe out of your banks and out of your shorelines, out of your beaches. So, but it's funny they don't mention that they don't study or say anything about the man-made things and about increasing or decreasing water, the way it's inflowing or outflowing out of Lake Superior and Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. Because there's 4 other different places they could go through the International Joint Commission and have this done. But they're not doing it, are they? And then all I've heard tonight is, we're not going to help any person that has private property. It's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is just for community. So what's going to happen? What's the solution? I understand that everyone has been caught in a very unusual situation. This isn't, I mean, the 80s weren't as bad as it is the last 2 years. Believe me, I've lived on the lake all my life. My home is over 70 years old. So something needs to be done. We need solutions. We don't need Band-Aids. But I would like to know what the Corps of Engineers is going to do, like for First Street Beach, that the sand is continuing to flow out of there, not to where it's supposed to go, not to the toe of the banks. So we need some help here. We need some engineers to get their heads together, as you said. You've got lots of them.
Okay, so I can definitely handle the regulation and diversions. We're trying to get the slide up. It's very similar to the comment about the editorial article that was written. And I do have to make one clarification. As the Corps of Engineers, we are not responsible for the diversions or regulation. We are part, you have Environment Climate Change Canada. It is a binational organization led by the International Joint Commission. The diversions are controlled through them. And the Chicago diversion out of Lake Michigan is done through a Supreme Court decree. This is not an Army Corps of Engineers decision. We operate and regulate to a plan that is agreed upon by the International Joint Commission. To the degree of impacts of the diversions, for instance, we're almost going to get a projection up here. I spoke with the Great Lakes Coalition in August in Holland and actually crunched some numbers of how much the Long Lake and Agokie diversion, so that is the diversion into Lake Superior, way up there. Oh, we're not talking right now. All right, that's the slide I'd like to speak to if possible. So we're going to pull up a slide of the diversions and regulation points that we have in the Great Lakes. But if I can get my numbers right from what we discussed back in Holland in August, the Long Lake and Agokie that comes into Lake Superior, from August 2018 through August of 2019, contributed approximately 1.4 inches of water to Lake Michigan, Huron. The Chicago diversion sent approximately 4.6 inches out. The total amount of water that came from those things, and I'm sorry I'm talking to indivisible slides in my head, but the one we talked about where we had the net basin supply, and in red we had precipitation, evaporation, and runoff. Those three components for August of 2018 through 2019 were approximately 4.6 feet. So again, you're talking about a scale of, what was that total, 1.4 minus 0.6. So we have a 0.8 inch difference of a regulation impact from that period versus a 4.6 foot difference from factors we cannot control. So there are studies and there are calculations that these are the regulation points. Okay, so for those that, to kind of play catch up, the regulation we're specifically talking to right now is way up in Lake Superior, the Long Lake and Agoge diversions. Those divert water into Lake Superior, and that water then gets into the system, passed through the St. Mary's River into Lake Michigan Huron, and the flow, and I'm sorry I can only speak with flow because I'm a hydraulic engineer, and I have to speak in cubic meters per second because it is an international regulation. For instance, the flow that comes into Lake Superior is about 130 cubic meters per second on average. The flow that goes out in Chicago is a regulated 91 cubic meters per second. So you're in and you're out, your balances are slightly off. But when you take those flows and you boil them down to actual level changes on Lake Michigan Huron, it is fractions of an inch. In those a negative net basin supply, where we had more evaporation. That could have been a minus 4 feet or something. Here is the inflow from Lake Superior. 2.3 feet. And of that, it was less than an inch. Sorry, it was 1.5 inches came from Long Lake and Agoge, of that 2.3 feet. So again, if we're looking at the fractions and we boil this down, you're looking at less than like 0.5% of the total supply to the lake through regulation points. And the studies are going on. And the International Joint Commission does have another committee called the Great Lakes Adaptive Management Committee that is looking at different ways of how they're regulating outflows. I am the U.S. Secretary for that committee, and I guarantee you, we are working very closely with some of the brightest people in the Great Lakes area and beyond to see if there are marginal areas where we could, potentially alter the way we're regulating as we move forward. But we always have to remember that 4.6 foot number, that's a real number. That came from Mother Nature from August of 18 to August of 19. Our man-made structures can't do that.
Okay, so you told me that, you gave me the statistics. For 1 inch of water that increases in Lake Michigan, how much property does that take up? I know there's a calculation for it. And it's a lot of feet.
Just as in the 10 years of low water, they wanted to close the Chicago diversion and increase, and those aren't options. These things
We're
are
not 10 years ago. We're not 10
No,
years
we're not. No, absolutely not. The Corps of Engineers is not responsible for this.
Well, Corps of Engineers are responsible for the piers.
Well, that's another, I'm sorry, that's
Well, all I want you to do is answer. It's in section 111 and 126. Why won't you answer those two?
because I'm speaking of water levels and regulation.
But
Sorry.
they do have to do with the water levels and how the flow is being refed.
It's just, that's not my, I'm sorry, I can't speak to that, it's not my expertise.
Hello, thank you for coming and giving us all this information. My name is Louise Schleifer. I'm going to ask for some more. I am not an engineer. I am technically challenged. Is there some place where we can get
all these great websites, because I'm trying to take notes and I can't write them down fast enough, and I'll put it in wrong. Do we go to the Manistee Board of County Commissioners? Give me one website that I can click, 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 click. Would be very helpful.
So yeah, following this meeting, I'll get with the county and we will get all this information as much as possible on the county website, Manistee County website. Now, bear with us, we're in the process of updating that, so the hamsters are a little tired on the wheel there. So,
I get it, but that would be great.
yeah, we'll try to put a link on that on our county website so people can
have
access
them
it.
all, including the living on the coast.
Yeah,
That would be great. Two more questions, which I know are too over the limit. But first of all, at one slide it said that Manistee is not approved for technical assistance from the Corps of Engineers. Why? Can we get it? I saw Muskegon, I think I saw Muskegon County. Do we want it? I don't know. That was just triggered.
So in terms of technical assistance under emergency response authorities, so far a lot of the issues that have been brought to our attention have been erosion. So for every issue that's brought up to us, we talk through it and what do we need to do next. So far with what has been brought to our office, it's not been something that's been eligible for technical assistance, but it's always an open conversation. We are regularly speaking with the county, with the state, and if we start seeing maybe a lot more flooding, a lot more flooding type issues that are not erosion related, that would be eligible for technical assistance. So it's not a no, this is the forever answer, it just hasn't been applicable quite yet.
My next question is, I read some in the newspaper about the Board of Commissioners requesting emergency declaration. Do I have that incorrect?
Well, I can address that. It was a resolution that I was working with Ezra Scott out of Marion County. He drafted the original, and then I wordsmithed it, and then we passed it at our last board meeting. And it's a resolution, I can tell you I've been involved with passing hundreds of resolutions in my time on the county commission over my years. And I've never had one that's had quite the response as this one has. It got a few people's attention, I can tell you that much. Using disaster in two different connotations. A lot of people here, when they think of disaster, they're thinking something along the lines of something that's happened relatively recently, like a tornado, straight line winds, blizzard of 78. That's what they're thinking in terms of disasters, and natural disasters anyways. I'm looking at the long-term drip, drip, drip that this has been imposing upon everyone throughout the entire Great Lakes region. I've got a lot of questions, and again, that's what I'm here to do, is help connect the dots and try to be the voice for the people to the leadership that goes up through the process. So that resolution, I'd have to look it up, but it's 2019. I don't know if it's -18 or 19. It's available. It should be on the county website. I would hope it is. If not, you can email me, and I would be happy to forward it to you.
What are you asking for in it? What was it a resolution to? I didn't quite understand that.
It would be easier for me. Well, I don't want to take the time to read it to you, but if you get with me, I'd be happy to share it with you.
Will do.
Okay? Thank you. I don't know if it's on the website, to be perfectly honest. I'm assuming it is, because it should be in the minutes of the last county board meetings. We have not adopted those until the next county board meeting this month.
Thank you all for being here tonight. I appreciate your time and coming out. I want to back up a little bit. Nothing quite as specific, but we're all here as public. You're all sharing information. It's public information, public due process. As we hear a lot about the circus in DC, it's a big issue about due process. And what concerns me is, as the county folks know, and my friend from the township knows, just to have a meeting, you have to have due process and let the public know in advance when the meeting is, where it's at, and what's going on. I used to write NIPD's permits for DNR and EPA, and if we wanted to issue a permit, you have to go through due process. Friends at the Corps want to put in dredge a harbor want to do a pier, or maybe along Rita's line, you have to do an EIS statement. There's a long bunch of hoops to go through. That's public due process. What concerns me, sorry Joe, I didn't get your last name, but DEQ, Eagle's now saying, hey, and I understand it's an emergency for a lot of people, but it's setting up, to me, a really scary precedent for future governmental actions is, hey, we're going to issue a permit and a public notice at the same time. Where's due process? So just that scares me because you're opening up a precedent to say, hey, Corps is now just going to go in and put in a new groin and they're going to dredge this harbor. And we're going to start doing it at the same time that the public, we just let you know. And so we jump through the legal hoops. And there's sunshine laws and there's FOIA laws, and you're circumventing due process. Maybe by the letter of law you're doing it, so I'll let you respond. Thank you.
Yes, so I'm not speaking for the Corps of Engineers at all when I say that, but it is allowed in our emergency. There's an emergency provision in our statute that allows us, in an emergency, if somebody's structure is about to fall in the lake, we're allowed to do this process where we would public notice and issue at the same time. And with the public notice, there's an opportunity for public comment. So it has, but that whole process was public notice previously as part of the statute and the rules. So it is part of our process that's allowed. That is the exception. We aren't out here issuing vast amounts of permits where we're public noticing and issuing them the same day. I'm just advising all the attendees here today that that is possible. If you've got a house that's about to fall in the lake, don't let it fall in because you're waiting for a permit. Talk to us, we'll get you a permit. That's the point.
You just briefly talk about the process that you go through to put in the application.
The overarching, the high-level general process. If you've got a project you're working on, or that you're proposing, you're conceiving, that you need to work in the water, you need to apply for a permit from Eagle and the Corps of Engineers would require permitting. So once you do that, once you have that in your mind, you should be applying through our My Water system online, filling out an application, checking the boxes, making sure you're submitting a cross-section, an overhead view, detailed plans, photographs, etc. Communicating with the field office that would be receiving that, and submitting that online. You pay online, everything's done online and remotely. We don't even accept paper applications anymore. So that once it's submitted, it starts our clock. We have 30 days to respond to you with a correction request. Most applications require more information than is submitted. Well, it's most common for us to have a question or two or 5. So we respond typically in a letter, and if we have an email, we do respond with that. Absolutely. We're trying to get this done fast. If you're placing phone calls to us, we'll walk you through the process. So that's the overarching high-level process. So if it's a minor project, we can issue the permit at that point. So we're trying to fit people into our minor project categories. You're asking questions, ma'am, and nobody else can hear them but me. Right. As I've just described, the overarching application process, that's generally it right there. So it depends on the details of your site.
You send in, you have the application in there, you get any adjustments made. Then you were talking about public notice. How long is that public
notice would be
period?
that would be a project that doesn't fit into a minor project. That's an individual permit. So we're going to try and get you to fit into a minor project so we can expedite it.
So if I'm trying to put in the seawall and rocks in front of it, I can make that into just quick and dirty? Or?
I would submit it as a $100 application fee, depending on your consultant and your project, and we would just determine in our office what is required and send you a correction request and direct you into the appropriate avenues. I can't speak to all the details of every application.
If most of us are in the same boat along the shore, I'm trying hard to understand why this is not just like the same thing. Everybody's applying for the same thing. So
not necessarily. Generally, they're applying for shoreline protection. Yes.
Yeah, it's either rocks or pilings and rocks? Or maybe what you were saying,
It's not a one-size-fits-all, that's the issue. You need to apply as an individual property owner. I can't issue a blanket permit for everybody in the room.
So if I have a neighbor putting one in, can I just tag on to hers?
We've already talked, and so you and I and the field staff should talk. That's going to be where I'm going to direct you to go. It's an individual site-specific application. You know that the landscape is not the same everywhere. Everybody has different bluff heights, different erosion going on. They have a different exposure, different fetch across the lake. There's so many variables. I can't speak to everyone.
She was saying about the permit, you can, once you get the permit, you just have to have it on the property. You don't have to post it on a tree, or do you?
I'm not concerned with posting a permit at this point. The directions for the permit would call that it's posted just like any other building permit. But we're not going to come out and fine you because your permit's not posted. It's available online.
Okay, but if you're in a public notice state for this process, after that is when you get the permit?
Once we make a permit decision, you would be advised of the permit issuance.
Okay, and I'm not supposed to do anything until that permit is posted on your website?
If you work without a permit, it's going to be a misdemeanor.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to make a quick comment in reference to what Mr. Dunn spoke about earlier. As he had indicated, both Manistee and Marion County have signed a resolution and requested that the governor consider a disaster declaration for the entire shoreline of the state of Michigan. I just want to make everybody aware that these two counties, per PA 390, Public Act 390, which is basically like the Bible for emergency management in the state of Michigan, it doesn't allow them to be able to declare for other counties in the state. That's not how the process works. However, as he had just indicated, response from both counties, that the resolutions were intended as a request for a disaster declaration, but rather a device to raise awareness, as he just indicated. And the governor's office does have that information. They're clearly aware of that. That's all I have.
Is there any additional questions? I got a couple minutes here. The last one here.
When we had the low water issue, part of it was attributed to the fact that the Corps had dredged the St. Clair. So I guess my question is, if that's a possibility, why isn't the Corps considering redredging?
Well, navigation channels are dredged to a specific depth.
Well, making it deeper doesn't adversely affect navigation, it helps it, right?
No, they have to be maintained at that depth. Going farther is not authorized. They have to be maintained at.
So you'll do it for shipping, but you won't do it for landowners?
It's not dredging deeper. No, it's maintaining a federal navigation channel. It's a maintenance dredge. That's outside of our authority.
That's not what?
That would be outside of our authority. The dredging channel is a specific.
Whose authority would that be?
Yeah, Congress has the code, yes. Congress? So you're going to hear us say a lot of what our authorities are. So when we say our authorities, they are typically congressionally granted permission to do certain things, and those come with limits. So yes, maintain a federal navigation channel here, and thou shalt keep it at such and such depth. So when we say we don't have the authority to deepen it, that would have to be a congressionally updated depth. So.
Maybe we go out on the bridge, St. Clair, and increase the water. There's a couple, I noticed that you got pinch points in the
Can I just say,
mitigate some of this high water.
there's back in 2012, the lake levels were really low, right? There's a study by Lenters that looked at what you were talking about, the environmental input and output. They said that evaporation can account for about ½ an inch of water level over the whole Great Lakes system in a day. And that's one of the factors that you should have probably mentioned, is that the biggest input is evaporation, or biggest outflow. You know, like all of those, you know, like the 4.6 thing there is one of the factors in evaporation. And these little diversions are a chunk change compared to the natural effect of evaporation.
I'd like 2 inches.
2 inches is 4 days of good weather, and it depends on the temperature. And it actually, they talk about the erosion or the evaporation season coming earlier, going late. And we've had like a cold summer, so the evaporation season this year was delayed a little bit. So basically, the levels are higher because of evaporation defect. You know, like we didn't have enough evaporation. Wintertime is a good evaporation level, and those kind of factors are you know, like out of our control. The thing that worries me most about this is that this summer we've had a couple of these storms that were just, you know, 6 inches of rain in Onekama in one day, in 18 hours. We're getting these storms that Gulf moisture coming up from the down south, and it's just inundated the basin. So the one question I have for the Corps in this is, I'm familiar with federal regulations. The word erosion and flooding. You know, we have erosion problems here, where rivers have flooding. So we fall outside of the realm of the legal definitions of those terms. And until those terms are changed, there's nothing they can do for private owners. You know, erosion is a problem, but flooding is an emergency. So that's all I got to say.
And so my point was going to address essentially that, and you're going to see this as a theme not only with the Army Corps but with our partners, is that we're only able to work within the policy that we have today. So this is a record-breaking event. This is, I won't say it snuck up on us, but we're dealing in uncharted waters, all of us. So when we have definitions of things, or there's authorities in place for certain depths, all of these are ongoing conversations that we're having, but we're subject to the due process of getting new legislation, new projects, all these types of things. So you're gonna see us talk a lot about immediate solutions, but just know that even if we're not talking about longer term solutions, we have the think tanks going across all of our partners. So there are a lot of these other conversations happening. So maybe we're not specifically addressing deepening a channel, but if Congress knows about this, the state knows about this, this is a huge conversation, and it's really important that at all levels we're continuing that communication so that your issues, your city knows them, your county knows them, the state, we're aware, everybody's aware, so that we can make adaptive changes to all pieces of this process. So we hear you, we're trying to find all these really interesting solutions. It just takes time.
And we'll do one more. Yeah, I guess.